I have been living a life of one dead-end job, going to an even more of a dead-end job my entire adult life, barely able to scrape enough to get by, always moving and living in ever-decreasing conditions. All of that does not excuse my actions. Buck was a coworker at my current terrible job. We picked fruit together for under the table cash. The heat was nearly unbearable, and I wished I could find anything else that kept me out of the sun. On our short breaks, he'd tell me about his money making schemes. He always come to work the next day, so clearly ain't none of those plans ever panned out. Near the end of the season, he was talking again on our break about a new plan, one that sounded almost solid. So, listen, my family owns some land. My selfish cousins aren't even gonna sell it. I grew up there, so I was thinking recently. I was fanning myself and taking small sips of water, not really paying attention while he spoke. There's this grave. No, like those buildings. What are they called? Crypts or something. Anyway, so like it's always been back there on that plot of land. I was told there's some kind of monster haunting it, and my parents thought I would stay away. But I was also told some really stinking rich family members were buried there. I had no idea how he went on in this heat. Sweat was nearly pouring down my face, and the breeze wasn't helping. So, so rich folk love being buried with this crap. Buck looked so animated and excited over his idea. His words gave me a slight chill despite the all encompassing sun. I did not want to think that he just suggested what I thought he did. I was desperate for money, but not that desperate. Not yet. I would rather work 100 dead-end jobs than disrespect the dead. I am not going on with that crazy idea. I stood up, letting him see how disgusted I felt. I left. Our break was almost over anyway. As I walked, he kept a smile on his face as if he knew I would reconsider. Risking a heat stroke was almost enough for me to toss aside all my morals and follow dumb old Buck into whatever plan he's cooked up. I couldn't seem to be able to even wipe the sweat from my forehead. When our workday was finished, Buck was waiting by my car with a bottle of cold water. He already knew my answer. He didn't need to wear me down. The heat did that for him. I drained half the bottle before looking at him. No one is going to get hurt, right? No one even going to notice. Is that right? I asked slowly. His smile grew as he nodded. I never should have gone along with it. The thought of working another day in mind-melting heat just to have enough money for gas was almost unbearable. I could always drop out of this crazy plan later. I listened to him tell me where to meet and what time. He already had the entire thing planned out. I just needed to show up and act as a lookout for him, and he would split whatever he found. Stress started to squeeze at my shoulders, making me feel more ill than the heat. If I could just get past this discomfort, I may never need to do another hard day's work in my life. We met the next Sunday. Buck assured me who owned the property wasn't going to be home. If they were, the crypt was so out of the way, no one could see, let alone go to it. We really didn't need a lookout. Buck wanted to be careful. This was a crime after all. The property was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods. The day had cooled down and the sky gray. The forecast threatening rain later that night. Somehow, The woods looked dread to me, as if the leaves didn't have enough color to them and the branches of the trees were too dry. We parked our cars down a dirt road where no one would come across them. I needed to trust that Buck knew where he was going. I could easily get lost in these woods. He took out some bolt cutters from his car and nothing else. I doubted we'd really need much else. I almost expected him to show up with a mask and a sack to put all his stolen spoils inside. As we walked, I heard nothing beside the sounds of our feet, each twig snapping under my steps, sounding like a gunshot in my overexcited state. Not a single bird chirped, and it made me feel a little wary of these woods. Buck made us meet before the sun set, and the light around us was strange. I wanted to just turn around, but we pushed on. Have these woods always been so creepy? I asked Buck in a low voice. Yeah, just the type of trees, I guess. He spoke in a normal voice, and it made my skin crawl. I expected us to be caught any second. The crypt wasn't too far away from the road. It was a stone building that looked fairly normal, at least what I expected it to look like. 2 light posts stood at either side of the door. As I got closer, I saw there was old carvings along the side of the stone walls. It had faded so much from time wearing it down, I could only make out faint figures carved along the side of the building. No label or names in the stone to say who was buried there inside. This place stood alone in the middle of the woods without anyone coming by and vandalizing it. It was so unsettling, not even the bravest of troublemakers would dare violate its walls. It wasn't even locked. As far as I could tell, the stone doors were heavy enough to stop someone from going inside. It would take both of us to push them open, but I couldn't bring myself to move forward. The door was down a few stone steps set into the ground. Because of that, I assumed the entire inside of the building was below ground. For some reason, I thought it was going to be all on one level. Buck wasted no time trying to push open the door. When it refused to move, he slammed the end of the bolt cutters against it until it jarred loose. I jumped every time he cracked that metal against stone. For someone who wanted to be careful and use a lookout, he sure was being stupid and making a lot of noise. What if someone heard you? I angrily said down to him. I told you no one comes around here. It'll be really quick. Stay out there and scream if you see something. Or you can come inside and make this entire thing go faster. He didn't leave me time to argue. He slipped inside the stone crypt, leaving me behind. I paced, looking around, convinced someone was going to catch us. The sun was setting, and I wanted to get the hell out of there. Thinking it'd get us out faster, I did another thing that I would always regret. I went inside after him. Buck had a flashlight he'd hidden in his pants pocket. Taking it out, the musty space was only being lit by that small source and a crack of light coming through the door. His feet left prints in the dust. Not even animals got inside this place before us. I rubbed my arms together, trying to fight off that sudden coldness that overtook me. Each wall had a slot covered with a plaque. Buck wasted no time prying off the gold trim from those plaque edges with a small screwdriver that he also hid in his pocket. Hurry up, get those things off so we could leave, I begged, not moving very far from the door. He paused, working to look at me, an odd expression on his face. We weren't just here for some little gold trim, and we both knew it. You know, the better stuff is inside, he said, nodding towards the wall. I signed up for this, and yet, him saying that made me feel dizzy for a few seconds. I could never forgive myself if it happened to destroy the stone covering and pull a coffin out to take anything of value. He hid his intentions from me. I knew what I was there for, and yet I refused to face the awful truth until that moment. I can't, I admitted, eyes downcast. Look, I know you're a good person, but I'll do all the hard work. Just help me smash this in and pull a coffin out just a little. I can do the rest, okay? And if we get caught, I'll just say I forced you into this, all right? I nodded, feeling numb and ready to go along with anything, just to put an end to what we were doing. Buck gave me the bolt cutters, and in just a few swings, I cracked through the stone covering the small space. Dust flew out, causing us to cough and choke in the small space. When we could see, Buck reached forward to knock aside more stone pieces and take hold of the bottom of the coffin. It was a beautiful thing once, now dusty and half rotten. The polished wood no longer shone. I took a hold of the edge, and together we pulled it out, and it crashed to the hard ground. Old wood cracking and moaning. More dust come flying up. I turned away, unable to look at what I just touched. I kept rubbing my palms on my pants, trying in vain to remove the filthy feeling. I heard Buck get to work behind me, but didn't turn to look. I stumbled forwards in the dark space, a hand out trying to find a wall. I needed to get as far away from him as possible. Him in the coffin was in my way of the door, so I could only walk to the empty side of the small room. At least, I was positive it was empty. I leaned against the wall, feeling sick. I've never been in the same room as a dead body before. Even though the remains would be a skeleton by now, I could have sworn I smelled musty, rotting air drifting towards me. When I placed my hand against the cool stone, I thought I heard something, and my hand pressed in. I pressed hard, distracted by the sound. Another click echoed, and Buck behind me stopped his work. Under my feet, the stone started to move. I quickly jumped to the side and pressed my back against the other wall as the door opened. The dust covered the marks, making it invisible. We never would have found it if I didn't place my hand in just the right spot. I was having none of this. A secret door inside a crypt? That sounded like bad news to me, but to Buck, it sounded like money. Good work. Come on. He slapped my shoulder, and my skin pricked where he touched me. I knew what his hands were touching just a second before. I cried out to stop him, but he was already halfway down the steps with our only light with him. As much as I hated the idea of going down and seeing whatever needed a secret door to hide, I hated being alone in a room with a dead body. I rushed after him, trying to talk him into coming back. The sub-basement room had a high ceiling. I wondered why anyone would go through the trouble of digging this all out. Buck shone a light on some candles. I quickly lit them with my lighter. I still kept one in my pocket. I stopped smoking because I no longer could afford it, but the lighter was useful to have around. With the dim firelight, I could see a bit better. No cobwebs were in this room at all. Logically, there should have been some sign of spiders taking up the space. Aside from the candlesticks, the room only held a single coffin. This one was not dirty or rotten like the other. It sat on a bed of stone, made of solid metal that glittered in the weak light. It looked like gold, but that would be impossible. Who on earth would leave a solid gold coffin just in the middle of nowhere? Gold plated, more like it. Still, it must have been worth a fortune. Buck looked at it hungrily. We could never get it up the stairs, and if we wanted to take it, we would need a different plan. Without any hesitation, he walked towards the coffin to run a hand over the lid. If they were buried in this, I wonder what else they took to the grave, he asked, but sounding as if he was speaking to himself. Buck, please don't. I started to go over to him, my knees shaking over how wrong this entire thing was. With a noise that nearly made my heart stop, he pushed the lid off. Here, I thought we would be more careful with something as precious as the coffin. Using his flashlight to look over what was inside, he let out a small gasp. I gathered up what courage I had left in me to go and look at what he was seeing. It also took my breath away. The body was wrapped in layers of nearly transparent silk, so I couldn't make out the features. On top, necklaces glittered inlaid with colored stones. Just one would be worth more than I ever made in my entire life. Coins of different metal was scattered throughout the coffin and on top of the silk. I thought I saw the shape of a crown under the fabric, but due to the poor light and it being so layered, it was hard to tell. My hands were itching to reach out and take handfuls of the gold and gems, but my mind wasn't smart enough to make me stop. Buck, this is wrong. It's all wrong. There is no way this was left untouched. I told him and felt myself tremble in fear. Well, it is, and that means more for us. Here. He reached in and took the frail-looking necklace and forced them into my hands. I nearly choked over holding something worth so much money. Some chains of gold were as thin as a spider's thread, and the others looped together with multiple chains to support their own weight. I took a step back, not being able to handle seeing him start to dig around in the coffin to collect the coins and anything else he may find. I wanted to stop him. I was far too shaken up to do so. Something else stopped him for me. After Buck pulled out another chain and looked it over, I heard an exhale of air that neither of us made. The cross necklace he was looking at dangled in front of his eyes, reflecting off the candlelight. He looked over his shoulder and towards me, his face pale from fear. Neither of us reacted at first when the corpse in the coffin sat up, the layers of silk falling from their face, layer by layer to slowly reveal what was underneath. I stepped back, tripping on my own feet, and fell while still staring at the mind-numbing sight. Buck, did you... I sputtered as I wanted to ask him if this was some sort of sick joke. Judging from the look on his face, it wasn't. He started to back away as the corpse moved. It braced itself on the edge of its coffin, using clawed, rotten hands. Slowly sitting up with creaking and cracking sounds, it directed a face towards both of us, the final layer of silk falling as it spoke. Give it back. Its voice was low and raspy at first, but it finally found its strength on the last word. I sat, staring with my mouth open at the face that glared over us. A rotten face, almost entirely bone, with a thin layer of flesh. The nose gone, along with its eyes. The eyes were covered with the same silk, but thin enough for us to see the empty sockets, with a tiny flickering red light inside. More gold chains dangled over the forehead and formed a crown made of black metal. The lips peeled back, showing off horrible and yet perfect teeth, sharp fangs taking up the entire front of its mouth. The thing was decorated with silk and gold, making it look beautiful, but it was gruesome. I let out a yelp of fear, my body not reacting to what I was seeing. The corpse swung one leg from the coffin and stumbled. I thought that was my chance to get away. Buck had other ideas. He slammed his steel-toe work boot into my nose, causing me to collapse to the ground. I dropped the necklace and held my face, not believing what just happened. He scrambled to collect what he could and gave me one last look before running as fast as he could up the stairs. I was only getting back up when the corpse made it to me. I heard the stone door close, trapping me inside with this monster. I never thought Buck would betray me like this, but I understood why he did. It still didn't make me forgive him. The monster let out a hissing sound that made it feel like there was ice in my veins. It grabbed the front of my shirt and slammed me back onto the ground. Hovering over top of me, it stared down with its face inches from my own. I felt hot tears starting to come to my eyes. I grabbed it by the wrist, trying to get free, but it stayed stuck like steel. "I'm sorry. I was tired of living the way I am. I didn't think anyone would notice. I didn't think anyone would get hurt," I babbled to the creature, unsure of why I needed to explain myself. I cursed the fact that I was in this situation, the fact that I'd gotten so desperate for money to do such a thing. I've seen other people just stumble into money. They didn't need to worry about gas money or if they could pay the rent and eat next month. They just kept going along in life with all their hard work resulting in something, while mine got me nothing. The entire thing was so bitter, it nearly made me sick. I knew I'd chosen to do this, and now I was going to die. I was the only one to blame, but if I had just a little bit more luck, I never would have gone along with Buck's crazy idea. I do not care for these trinkets," it said with a voice that sounded like the dead. It reached over and pulled some of the gold chains from its head to throw them into my face while still holding me down. "I only care about the one item that man just took." Oddly enough, I felt sorry for it. Its voice sounded so pained I couldn't help it. The door closed. I started out meekly before the monster shut me up. "I can open the door if I regained my strength. I require blood to do so. Give me some, and I shall spare you. Stay with me as I recover my precious cross, and I shall reward you greatly." I looked up at it, shell-shocked. I never expected to get out alive, let alone earn something from this. Broken chains dangled off the creature's forehead, and my throat felt dry. It could be lying, but I would be dead either way. Judging by those fangs, this was a vampire. And didn't TV show that vampire bites weren't all that bad? My heart was racing, and I nodded because I lacked any other option. It waited until I gave verbal agreement, though. The moment the permission was out of my mouth, I regretted it. I would rather have starved to death trapped with this monster than what came next. Its jaw unhinged and rows of sharp teeth came closer. The fangs were by far the longest, but a shark would be jealous of the rest. A clawed hand grabbed the top of my head to forcefully pull it to the side. I was raised off the ground as those awful teeth came down. The mouth was so wide it bit well past my neck and into my shoulder, with hot pain flooding my entire body. My mouth opened in a scream, but no noise came out as every joint and muscle locked up. My hands twisted in claws of pain. My back arched and spine locked. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I could only suffer as that monster took what it wanted. Time passed so slowly, and I fell into an empty darkness that I hoped was death, so I would never experience that pain again. When I woke up, the sun was blinding me, my entire body sore and stiff. I took a while slowly moving around and getting up, feeling like several trucks hit me. When I sat up and blinked everything into focus, I saw I was outside the mausoleum. The sun so bright, I didn't see the figure standing just inside the open doorway at first. I was more interested in my torn shirt and new bite-shaped scar. "Young one, come here." I jumped at the voice, but my legs refused to let me stay standing. In the doorway was the creature from before, proving it wasn't some awful dream. I did not move to get closer. "I gave you blood. I really don't want to get in the middle of you tracking down Buck, so..." I sat while trying to drag myself away from the building and along the forest floor. The cross belonged to my lover. I only wanted back. I stopped moving. The voice sounded more human. I sat looking over into the darkness, barely able to see the creature. I picked up some new words after drinking your blood. I should not be too much of a problem to deal with. "Sorry about that. The words I mean," I said, thinking about all the dumb crap this thing now would have inside its head. "I never mind that. You have not fulfilled your end of our deal. I said I would spare you if you gave me your blood, but I never said how much. You sneaky little..." "Your friend is the sneaky one. Only one related by blood may enter this place. Only ones with a sacrifice may take something from me. You were never meant to leave this place alive." I could have sworn the thing was smiling in the dark. It made sense why he offered to bring me alone, even though I clearly wasn't needed. I felt a small bit of anger starting to bubble up in my stomach, but it fizzled out over the idea of being stuck with this creature. And I wasn't entirely comfortable with the thought that Buck's head was most likely on the chopping block. I didn't forgive him for what he did, but that doesn't mean I was a killer. "What's your name?" I asked the creature, making it pause. "DeHale." We both paused, listening to the leaves in the wind. I felt as if I was making the wrong choice. At the same time, there could be a worse one. "I'm Jesse. I guess I'll be helping you out." "What do I need to do?" Reaching a skeletal hand into the sunlight, I heard crackling as smoke started to come from the brown flesh. accept me. This time, my legs did work. Walking over, I took the hand offered, feeling it cool against my own, even as it sizzled in the sunlight. The figure started to disintegrate, and I worried had done something wrong until I felt myself get heavier. Nothing I couldn't get adjusted to, just heavier. I am going to rest until nightfall. It is best if you try and find the cross before I do. I heard the creature's voice coming from around me, but didn't see it. I knew I was now carrying the monster out of the woods with me, and it was right. If I could find Buck before that monster, he might be spared, and that was a big if. He may have already sold the stolen cross by now. I could only hope he hadn't.